It was through my experience of hiring a coach who helped me work through my mindset and reminded me that nothing was wrong with me. I wasn't broken because I had taken on that belief for so long, like something was wrong with me. I had cooties or I was going to go to hell. I thought I had to fix that. I thought that getting baptized was going to wash it away. And it didn't.
What do you really know about people who are born transgender? Have you ever met someone who's transgender? Well, if you're like me, you're curious but hesitant to ask questions. Well, welcome to Demystifying the Transgender Journey. In our conversations with people who were born transgender, their families, friends, and the professionals who support them, we ask probing questions and discover insightful and educational answers. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. Now let's get right into today's episode. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. I'm Lynn Murphy. I am the founder of Women Who Push the Limits and collaborator with my amazing co-host, Wendy Cole, who is a transition mentor, a life coach, and a consultant. And between the two of us hosting this podcast. And people always find it interesting that a cisgender woman and a transgender woman have paired up to do this Demystifying the Transgender Journey. But what we're trying to do is educate people who are misinformed or disinformed or have bad information about what's going on. Wendy transitioned at the age of 67, so you're going to hear a little bit about her experience tied in with this today. And we are so happy to have Sam Castle as our wonderful interviewee today. Sam is the founder of Be You, Do You Coaching. He's a behavioral health professional, a coach, a podcaster, so he's going to be good today, and a public speaker. He is 42 years old and he transitioned at age 36. So we're going to ask Sam, share a bit of your story with us. And just full disclosure for me, I don't know that much about trans masculine. I've
Mhm.
talked to more trans feminine people, but share your story with us. Tell us where it started, how you're doing, what you did. Let's go through
Wow.
this.
Well, thank you for that amazing introduction. So I'm Sam Castle. I knew at a very young age, I already knew who I was at the age of 6. I grew up in a single parent household. My mom was primarily the provider, my mom and grandmother. My dad struggled with drug addiction. I just remember a lot of times the household was very chaotic and busy because my mom was always in a caretaking role. So when it came to talking about sexual orientation, identity, that was never a conversation in my household. I think a lot of it has to do with cultural and also religious beliefs and background. So I grew up in the church, uh, heavy in the church.
Which
So it was
church?
very Church of Christ.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So my mom actually grew up in Church of Christ. And then, of course, that was passed down to the kids. We have to go to church Wednesday, Sunday. That was the belief that was instilled in us. And so that was the belief that I held on to, and a part of the fear of why I wasn't able to disclose or even bring it up in conversation. I also didn't have the language. I couldn't identify or explain how I was feeling. I just knew that I was a boy. That was the best way that I could describe what I was feeling. I was a boy, never felt aligned with being female, nothing female at all. Like toys, clothing. I cut my ponytail off when I was 6 years old, ran with the boys, did all of the boy things. It was never a phase. When I look back at the age of 6, I always envisioned myself getting married to a woman, having kids, having the house and the picket fence. Like that was my vision for myself. And then when I found out, voila, you're not a boy. I was pissed, I was angry, I was sad, I was hurt, I was confused because all this time I thought I was a boy. And no one was correcting me.
But did you even know what that was all about at that age? That's a pretty young age to try and make sense of all of this.
No, I had no clue. But when I look back, the signs were there. I cut my ponytail off. Whenever I was forced to wear a dress, I couldn't wait to get home to change out of my dress. I always kept like a duffel bag whenever we would go to church or go to family members' house to have dinner after church. I always had a pack of clothes because I couldn't wait to get out of the dress. It just made my skin crawl. Like it was just I felt trapped in the wrong body. I
Yeah.
can tell you that now, like looking back, like that's how I felt.
So when you
Sam,
were a teen or going through puberty,
Yeah.
what was that like?
Well, that was hell. So, so when I started puberty and started developing, I started questioning even more. Like I remember when I first started, I went to my older cousins. We grew up together. We wore the same clothes. We were twins all the way up until high school. They dressed us alike. She happens to be a lesbian, by the way. Uh, but we talk about it all the time. She said, I always knew, like she was my confidant back then. And I went to her when I started, my cycle. I was afraid. Like I'm bleeding. What the hell is this? But it was just a bunch of confusion. Like I still didn't know. So when I did come out to my mom at 18, I came out as lesbian because that was the closest that I could get to how I felt. I was always masculine presenting. So when I came out to my mom, I told her I'm a lesbian. I'm attracted to girls. But I was met with, well, I'm not going to let the devil take your soul. I should have taken you to church more. I should have done this. I should have done that. And so there was no way I could tell her, well, mom, I'm actually not a lesbian. I feel like this. So my entire journey was navigating it alone. I've been out of the house since I was 22. I moved to San Francisco with my partner at the time. And that exposed me to a lot of resources around gender transition, just around adulthood. Like I got a lot of exposure.
what
So then,
year was that? Do you remember?
In 2004, I moved out of the house at
Wow.
22.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
then once you got to know more lesbians, more LGBTQ people, did you start meeting transgender people? Had you figured that piece out yet?
No. So no one in my family that I knew of was LGBT at all. I didn't find out until I was 22 that my mom's mom, her sister transitioned from male to female. I didn't find this out until 21, 22 years old. But I never got the opportunity to talk to them because they moved away.
Mhm.
And there was never a discussion. It was more so of that unspoken, it was just you don't talk about it.
Mhm.
So the first experience that I had with someone who was transgender masculine, I started watching a documentary on YouTube called The Aggressives. And at the time, this person identified as a masculine lesbian, but then they soon eventually transitioned to male. And so that was when I was able to connect the dots and was like, this is what it is. Like, okay, I have someone that looks like me. It was another African American, masculine identified lesbian, but then transitioned to male, and they were telling their story. And it was almost like they were telling my story too.
What year was that? Do you remember offhand?
At this time, I was 24.
Okay.
Or, and
20,
then
2006.
yep. So there was a medical clinic in San Francisco that offers like low cost medical services where I could see a therapist, I could see a doctor. So I immediately started seeing a therapist, a doctor. But at this time, the term gender affirming care wasn't a thing. They
Mhm.
weren't calling it that.
At that point, we were still a psychological with no treatment
Yes.
and no cure per
It
the
was
therapeutic community and the medical community, which didn't
right.
change until 2012.
Yes, it was still considered a disorder. And when I got connected to the doctor's role was to create me a good letter for me to get approved for any type of surgery. So I started working towards getting top surgery, but it got denied because they deemed it cosmetic at the time.
Mhm.
So I kept running into all these hurdles and all these roadblocks. But like Wendy said, then gender affirming care came along in 2012. Well, the organization that I had an opportunity to work for started gender affirming care in 2013. And the same therapist that I had back in my 20s happened to be my same gender affirming therapist when I started working for this healthcare organization years later. So I kind of felt like everything went in a full circle. Like even though I wasn't able to transition early on, the stars, if you would say, were aligning. Like all the experiences led me up to now.
So other than the therapists and the doctors, did you have friends or coworkers or anybody who was really helpful on this journey?
No, I was solo. I was pretty much solo.
Hmm.
I was pretty much solo. That's
I can
why
totally relate to that.
I was pretty much solo. So all of the like pros and cons I had to go through by myself. Like all of the hiccups I had to go through myself. I went to therapy alone, all of my doctor's appointments alone. I got remarried because the person I was with previously said, I didn't get with you for you to transition. If I wanted a man, I would have gotten with a man. So that was another barrier of why I didn't transition then because my partner at the time wasn't going for it. So I had to compromise, compromise my happiness. And so when I met my now wife, I shared with her like right away. I said, this is how I feel, how I've always felt. I'm not compromising this time around. And she's been my biggest supporter.
Oh, and how long have you two been together?
We've been married since 2018.
Oh, good. So
Yeah.
now you've got some support. You've got a
I've
loving
got some,
relationship.
yes.
That's amazing.
I have a community of people now who looks like me, who I can, identify with. I mean, I have a diverse group of friends, straight, LGBT, the whole rainbow. I love
Mhm.
it.
Oh, congratulations on that.
Yes, congratulations. That's excellent.
Thank
I
you.
can totally relate to what you just said.
Yeah, it was lonely up until I transitioned in 2018. It was a pretty lonely road.
Mhm. And were you checking YouTube, Googling? How were you finding information once
I
you
was
identified that this was, transgender?
I was Googling, I was researching, watching videos. So I got hired by, I don't want to say their names because I'm
Mhm.
still going through a process. I actually resigned from this healthcare organization April of last year. I finally walked away. Very toxic work environment. Couldn't be myself. I'll leave it at that. But they played a big part, like in I was able to pay for my gender affirming care from hormones, surgeries. So
Mhm.
even though it didn't work out employment wise, it worked out as far as getting my healthcare resources and needs met. So when I got hired by them in 2015, I found out that they had gender affirming care or they offered it. So I was able to reconnect with services. And like I said, the therapist that I happened to have in 2015 was my same therapist before when I was in my 20s doing my research.
Mhm. And so they were supporting that within the organization,
Yes,
even though there was some other issue, but that wasn't the issue then.
right.
And did you transition in front of your coworkers? What was the process there? How did that work?
Yeah. Yeah, I got hired with the organization in 2015, but I didn't transition till 2018. So the hurdle wasn't my partner at the time. The hurdle now was still familial expectations and just I was afraid of losing my family. So I was already met with, the response I got from my mom when I came out as lesbian. So I was like, how the hell am I going to tell her I'm transitioning? And so I actually, when I had my first surgery, I told her I was just getting a breast reduction because of my back.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's how I shared that with her. But then I slowly just started opening up because I also went back to therapy too. So that was a big help in helping me address issues with my mom and family and everything that I was repressing up until that point. It gave me more confidence to have the conversations that I needed to have.
And you got help with setting boundaries, and
Yes.
because boundaries are very important, especially if you're staying with family or
Yes.
near family.
Yes, I got good at setting boundaries. I got good at speaking up for myself. I got good at just showing up for me because up until that point, I was showing up for everyone else and neglecting myself. And so transitioning for me, I felt like it was a complete transformation, like not just physical, but mentally, emotionally, spiritual too. It just gave me the confidence that I needed to be able to walk this journey.
That's where you get your mantra of you don't need permission.
Yes,
Be
and
who you
that's
are.
yeah. And so when I transitioned in 2018, that was a reminder for me, like, be you, do you, like, be yourself. You don't need permission. So that's pretty much how that mantra came about was through my transition.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
go ahead, Wendy.
what were your challenges during that transition? Your biggest challenges, both physically and emotionally?
My biggest challenge, of course, was the family piece. I felt like it caused a wedge for sure because no one understood it. I was getting like mixed responses. Some family members were, oh, we already knew. And then my mom was completely oblivious. I even took a step farther and invited her to therapy, like one of my therapy sessions, to give her her own space to explore her feelings and thoughts.
Hmm.
The therapist was actually not my own therapist. I researched on my own, found her a Christian-based therapist that shared the same beliefs as her. So just imagine how uncomfortable I was. But again, I wanted to make my mom happy.
Uh,
And
how has the relationships progressed since 28?
it's gotten better. She still has issues with the pronouns. She's able to call me Sam. So my birth name was Samantha, which wasn't easy to change it, right? I feel like it was meant to be. It was meant to
Right.
be. She calls me Sam, but she still has a hard time with the pronouns.
Mhm.
But she does correct herself. So we have made progress. It's still not as close as I want it to be, but I feel like it's just going to take time. And I just continue to move forward. You know, if she catches up, she catches up. If she doesn't, she doesn't.
That's exactly what I say all the time is our family has to transition with us. And
Mhm.
if they don't, that's basically it.
Yeah, yeah. But I have also found along the way, I've met some amazing people that have become family and my biggest support system.
Exactly.
So family is just who you're related to. For me now, it's all about relationships and connections with people.
Yes. The
And
gay
Sam,
community was my biggest supporters. How were they to you?
That's a good question. I would say after my transition, because I was able to be more authentic and be myself, relationships have been easier because I know
Mhm.
who I am now. I don't
Mhm.
feel like I have to play a role.
I'm curious.
Mhm.
From very early on, I was very open with gay people, but with straight people, I let them get to know me first for
Mhm.
quite a while before I ever came out to them.
Mhm.
What's your approach to that?
I'm pretty much the same way. I want the person to get to know me first, but
Hmm.
it's so weird because I'm more open and comfortable with the straight community than I
Hmm.
am with my own community. And because at the end of the day, I've always gotten respect from the straight community, and they're like, I would have never thought otherwise. And at first, I would be offensive to that, but then I also take it as a compliment
Hmm.
because they see me as me.
yeah.
Now, yeah, I found that it's also location dependent too, because where I lived before, a lot of straight people would say, "Oh, it's okay," and then quietly disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Did you experience the same thing or something
No,
similar?
it was the complete opposite.
Oh,
Like
okay.
I've had the straight community embrace me even more and like support me even more.
Good.
So a lot of my coaches and mentors are straight. They're not
Hmm.
LGBT. A lot of the people in my circle are straight. They're not LGBT at all.
Mm.
Now, I moved from Pennsylvania to Rhode Island. Rhode
Hmm.
Island has been wonderful,
Yeah,
very open, very welcoming, and the straight community's been great.
yeah. Like
So,
I think it's all about location.
hmm.
Definitely location, and I would say education plays a big piece.
Hmm.
I feel like now regardless of what the media is saying, people are open to learning. But we're not seeing that on the media. We're not going to see that in the media.
Yeah.
And definitely we won't be seeing that
No,
in the media.
we're
But
gonna,
that's been my same experience too, Sam,
yeah,
is I would sit and talk with people and they were curious.
yeah,
And with your approach, same as my approach, ask anything you wish and absolutely nothing's off limits.
mhm,
That just really draws people in
yeah,
to engage
yeah.
and it changes perspectives.
It does. I just had the same experience with my wife's sister. We just had this long conversation yesterday. I always come to her with the approach of I'm an open book. There's no dumb questions. And, like explaining to her like I'm preparing for my next surgery. And so, I was open about that and explaining, the process. And she was asking the questions. And I never thought that that would even happen because before her mindset was completely different. It was like, I
Mhm.
don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know about it. But it's just, I feel like the more the person gets to know who you are, I've realized that we're no different. We just have a different journey.
Because I hear a lot within the community about how people hate us,
No,
but I have not experienced that personally.
I
You?
haven't. No, mine have been like isolated incidents. Like my last incident that I had was 2 years ago at my workplace parking lot. This
Okay.
was before I started hormones, so there weren't any changes. And this person assumed and started calling me all kinds of names and getting irate and tranny this, tranny that, in
Wow.
this, in that. But it's also the location I live in. I live in a very Trump town, you can
Mhm.
call it. But other
So
than that, I don't get any hate from people.
did you start transitioning socially, just the physical outward appearance? Was that gradual, or was that something that you just kind of one day said, no, this
Well,
is it?
when I was younger, I feel like I had already socially transitioned because when I was younger, I wanted people to call me by Sam. I
Mhm.
never wanted them to call me by my birth name. When I was old enough to buy my own clothes, I started shopping in the men's department.
Mm.
Like everything was, male. So I started with top surgery first in 2018 and then hormones 2 years later. So 2020, I started hormones. I wanted to give myself time. I wasn't sure if I wanted the hormones or not. So I needed time to just sit in with the surgery first before, taking my next step.
Mhm.
And then I started hormones 2 years later.
How did that feel when you first started? I always get asked that. That's why I'm asking you.
It's like a butterfly. I don't know if you're familiar with the butterfly process, but I share the butterfly process. It was almost
Okay.
like going into a cocoon and then you're blossoming into this butterfly. And it's uncomfortable at times because, again, emotions are coming up. Emotions came
Mhm.
up to the surface, like literally everything from childhood to that point. But then it's also transformational. So it was a
Now,
combination,
you experienced during that a lot of doubts
a lot of
and
doubt.
limiting beliefs, and how did you overcome them?
I hired a coach.
Okay.
So it was through it was through my experience of hiring a coach who helped me work through my mindset, my
Hmm.
limiting beliefs, my childhood trauma, and reminded me that nothing was wrong with me. I wasn't broken because I had taken on that belief for so long, like something was wrong with me. I had cooties or I was going to go to hell. I thought I had to fix that. I thought that getting baptized was going to wash it away. And it didn't.
Hmm.
So speaking of your religion or your faith, do you still have a faith? What's the impact of that religious upbringing and your mother's feelings about, what's
She
going to happen to you? How has that progressed?
I don't believe it anymore because again, it boils down to a belief. And the moment I stopped believing it was when I started transitioning. I realized it was more of her own fear, not mine. So I gave her her fear back. And I am spiritual. I have my own spiritual practices. I'm not connected with the same church anymore. I left that church in 2017 and never looked back. So I have my own spiritual practices. I do believe in a higher power, but my spirituality has definitely evolved over time. Like I'm a respecter of all
Mhm.
practices and religions. I don't believe in like your religion is right or wrong.
So you're allowing other people to be who they are and you're being who you are.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
listening to your story about using a coach, that feeds into what you do as a coach,
Yeah.
how you know how to
Yeah.
talk to people who are transitioning, people who are having concerns about it. So you're
Mhm.
in a perfect position to do that, aren't you, Sam?
Yeah, I feel like coaching also helped me confirm my purpose and what I'm supposed to be doing. Like it helped get back to me and who I actually am as a person and how I want to help others around me. And I feel like through my own lived experience, I'm able to do that.
And isn't that interesting how we have to go through these
Yeah.
experiences that may not be the most fun experiences. That's not life,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
puts you where you're supposed to be, where your soul or the universe says, Sam,
Yeah.
this is what you got to do. So here's what we need to lead up to that with.
Yeah. In that moment, it felt like hell. It was uncomfortable. Like Wendy said, I had all of these belief systems and shame and guilt, but looking back, it all served its purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of the way I look at it too. It's the universe puts these things in your path and
Yeah.
leads you in that direction.
And the universe has done that. So
Yeah.
while we have, all of this stuff happening with the election, like I'm just trying to stay focused on what I can control, you know.
That's all we can do.
Yeah.
And we're hearing things, silly things about people who are, unhappy with their transition. They want to detransition, and some of those, it's just such a minute number of people. But was there
Yeah.
ever any time when you thought, oh, I'm going to stop this, I'm not going to do this?
No. I
Okay.
never I never thought about that. And even when I do think about detransitioners, like I said, I'm also a respecter of, other people and their experiences. And if that's something that they want to do, then that's their journey. But I also feel like the reason why, which it's been reported, it's the familial and societal expectations. So we don't detransition because we're unhappy. We detransition because we're trying to make everyone else happy.
Yeah.
A lot of times, also, people who detransition, it's because they didn't mentally, emotionally transition themselves.
Yes.
They just did the outward appearance and we're done.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Mental health is a huge part. Like mentally, emotionally, that's a part of it too. It's not so much the outer appearance, it's the inner work it's required. You have to. It just
You were socialized as female. I was socialized as male. I went through a lot of work to deconstruct that. How did you do?
I'm still deconstructing.
Well,
Like
yeah, it is a
I'm,
work in progress.
I'm still, figuring it out, but I give myself room to explore
Uh-huh.
and learn. Like, for example, before transition, I wanted nothing to do with fingernail polish. Well, one day I experimented. I went to the nail shop with my wife and I was like, oh, let's try some nail polish. I don't like it, but I gave myself permission to explore,
Good.
and not putting a label to it like, oh, only men look like this or women look like this. Like I've gotten over that
Yeah, the
completely.
first time I had my nails done in a salon, I was in guy mode.
Yeah.
And I was told that men come in and have their nails done. Okay. I tried it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just, I'm open. I'm open to trying.
Yeah.
Like even around sexual orientation and exploration, like my wife, we have
Hmm.
open conversations about that, like where we're at, how we feel. Because when I started testosterone, I was primarily attracted to women, but then I had situations to where I was questioning it. And then I connected the dots and I said, well, I've always identified as a man. So it's not now that I'm comfortable in my own skin,
Hmm.
this is what it is. I feel like I'm trying to explain it. I think
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
it,
sexual
gender are
orientation
different. Yeah,
is, and it develops at the same time in the second trimester in different parts
yes,
of the brain.
yeah,
And what I found is I was repressing my feminine
yeah,
qualities to a point where I also repressed my sexual orientation. I
yes,
married a woman because that was a checkbox in the heteronormative scheme of life.
right.
One of the things, too, for a little girl 6 years old,
Hmm.
wanting to wear boys' clothes and play with boys, you had more freedom to do that, I think, than I did
Yeah, there was
because
a lot
of
of freedom.
societal norms.
Hmm. Hmm.
You could be a tomboy,
Yeah, and that's what everyone was labeling it.
right?
Oh, you're a tomboy, you'll grow out of it.
Oh, I heard the same thing
So,
too.
but I didn't grow out of it. But yeah, it's been a lot of exploration for sure. I am primarily attracted to women, but again, it was like even those questions were coming up because again, as a kid, I had to repress all of that. I wasn't able
Mhm.
to address it. So the transition has helped me address those things as well.
Yeah, after surgery is when I figured out what
Mhm.
my true sexual orientation was,
Yeah.
much to my amazement and shock.
Because you weren't attracted to men when you were a man, were you?
No, being with
Mhm.
a guy was gross.
Well, and that's what's different with Sam. Sam, you were attracted to women when you were in a woman's body, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
society kind of accepts that.
Yeah.
You have
It's more
lesbian
accepting.
relationships. You didn't have to marry somebody to prove that you were a girl, a
Exactly.
woman, that kind of thing.
Right. I did force myself into, the heterosexual relationships, but they were just uncomfortable. And I always felt like one of the guys. It was just so awkward. It was awkward to say the least.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we do to conform to all the standards that we were socialized from childhood.
Yeah.
From the time we're born all the way through, we're treated by the sex assigned at birth as opposed to the gender that we really are.
One other thing that Wendy and I were talking about, because neither she nor I is a person of color,
Hmm.
and wondering if there's some difference. I don't know, Wendy, did you want to pursue? Did you have a question on that or?
Sure. I see all the statistics on trans feminine people that are killed during the course of a year,
Yeah.
and the vast majority are people of color. And then there'll be a few white people in there.
Yeah.
And I've never quite really understood that. And you mentioned in the beginning cultural. Can
Yeah.
you go into that?
Yeah. Well, it's a big taboo to be anything else but straight, lesbian, gay, bi, trans. So I had to repress that part of myself. And so a lot of it is cultural. And then also with trans women of color, you get into the situation with Black men who, like you said, are conditioned to repress who they are. And so when they find out they are attracted to a trans woman, it's either I explore it or I have to keep it hidden, which is I have to keep it hidden. So then that's ultimately a lot of cases, it's because of that, like men being on the down low aren't able to express who they truly are because culturally, Black men are not gay. You're not supposed to be gay. You're not supposed to be anything but straight. So
Okay.
that plays a big part of it.
Now, in terms of being trans masculine, is that easier within that culture because, like, you're one of the guys now?
No, there's still challenges.
Okay.
It hasn't been my experience, but a lot of trans masculine men that I do know, they don't have very close relationships with their families. So a lot of times it's the family that we choose, and it's
Mhm.
never our blood family. I don't have that experience. I mean, honestly, I've been I don't want to say estranged, but I haven't seen a lot of my family since before COVID.
Okay.
I stay connected with my mom, but other than that, I don't really have a connection with family.
Do you have a
Okay.
large family?
Huge family. My great grandmother had 13 kids. There
Wow.
was always a house full of kids, a lot of things going on. That's why I'm not surprised that my mom says she didn't know. I mean, she was the provider.
Yeah. Well, what about children? Do you have a desire to have children?
No, my wife and I talked about it off and on, but we like our free life of kids. We have two dogs. My dad actually currently lives with us now.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
And he's obviously accepting.
He's very accepting. He sees me as his son.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. That's really great.
Yeah, me too. I wasn't surprised because he and my mom had a totally different upbringing. Yeah,
What was
totally.
the difference?
Well, my dad's side isn't really heavily into religion.
Okay.
I think that that plays a huge part.
yeah. When someone's very much into religion, if the other's
Yeah.
not, that can be touchy.
Yeah, it's just something that's I find very hard to get away from. It's like that belief is so deeply ingrained that it causes, people who are religious to live life. I just that's it's deep. It's deep.
Wendy talked to a mother of a transgender daughter who is deep in a religion and was treated very, very poorly when her daughter transitioned. Yeah, it's tough. And people
Yeah.
are so ingrained in that it's either black or white. They can't see that there are any variations. They can't see that there are any other options other than
No,
just straight.
straight. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I also think, when I do reflect, I think it's more so our parents' inability to look in the mirror themselves, and maybe they're not addressing their own childhood wounds or trauma, and we're the closest to them to project their own feelings onto. I think that that plays a huge part too, because it's also generational. Because like I said, growing up, we didn't talk about therapy. Therapy wasn't a thing. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't even talk about sexuality in the house.
Well, and it's interesting because I look at you as someone who's quite a few years younger than I am, and I grew up in an era where you really didn't talk about it. You didn't even dare think about it. You know?
Yeah, that's why I
That,
say it's culturally. I think it's really culturally, because I know a lot of trans masc white individuals where their parents and family are embracive and supportive. I definitely think it's just
yeah.
cultural.
Well, and Sam, I know you do a lot of coaching. You're out, you're speaking, you're visible. How do you balance advocating for the transgender community versus your own self-care? Is that an issue to get that balance?
I'm still figuring out.
Right.
So, I spent the last 14 years in corporate healthcare. So being in entrepreneurship is new for me still, but the community has been very supportive. The phase that I'm in now is the learning phase. Like, I'm learning how to balance taking care of myself, but then also advocating for the community. Leading up to the new year, I took a 2-week break off. I didn't do anything advocacy related, work related, and that was challenging to do. Very challenging, because I'm also working through the result of my toxic work environment. So I have to be really connected with the emotional piece. So I still do therapy, which is important to me. Like, I stay connected with my therapist and my mentors, and just know that I don't have to have it all figured out, because like, I want to have it figured all out. I got to see what it looks like, but I'm in that learning phase right now, and just reminding myself everything's going to be okay, because I never saw myself walking away from my job.
So do you have other practices that you recommend to other people?
I work out. I do a gratitude journal every single day. I pray, I meditate, I go for walks. My wife and I do traveling. I'm a huge foodie, so we like to try different foods. We cook at home. My dogs have been a huge emotional support. Yeah, they've been life-saving, my
What
dog.
kind of dogs do you have?
I have a Shih Tzu and a Yorkie.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I do a lot of things. I like staying connected to community and personal development. Like, that's been my thing lately.
So what kind of misinformation do you run across most frequently, or disinformation, or people who are confused about what this is all about?
Well, you said the word confused. I get I see a lot of times people saying we're confused, and I
Oh,
can't tell you, like, I know myself better than anyone else does. We're not confused. We know at a very young age. Myself, I didn't have the space to explore who I was. And so it took time. I had to navigate and I had to figure it out. But once I did, I can confirm and affirm who I am. I'm not confused. So that's one. We're not confused. We know. We always know.
well, and I think people in general, if they're into any type of personal growth, maybe it's not about their gender, but go through phases of who they are.
Mhm.
Yes. We
You know,
all transition.
we hear women who have been the mother and the wife, the
Mhm.
housekeeper and the cook and all that for so many years, and then come to a point where all
Yeah.
that's gone, and then they're trying to figure out who they
Right.
are. So I can see where people would say confused does not make any sense because those people aren't confused. You're not confused.
Yeah. We're not
That's a very
confused.
good point. Thanks.
Yeah. Another one, we touched on it. Gender and sexual orientation are two different things. So, for example, a female that transitioned to a man and then they date another man, well, they're considered a gay man. Sexual orientation and gender are different. Your gender is how you identify, and orientation is who you're sexually attracted to. So that's another one where people get,
Hmm.
The thing that I find is people tend to equate sex, with gender, because
Yes.
it's all between the
Gender.
legs when the
Yes.
doctor assigns it at
Yeah.
birth. And
Yes.
that's at best a guess.
Yes.
In
Yes.
reality, it's a guess.
Yes. It is a guess. You don't know.
Then by the time we begin to realize
Mhm.
who we really feel like, not
Yeah.
maybe put words to it, but how we feel, we've
Mhm.
already gone through enough of that socialization to know that it's wrong by
Yeah.
their standards.
By their standards. Yes. That's a good one too.
And that's very hard to get across to some straight people.
Yeah.
So, Sam, in your coaching or just in your interaction with other people who are maybe thinking about transitioning or starting to transition, what do you think is the most important thing for them to consider or to do as they're at that initial point?
Well, I'm always going to advocate for the mental health piece. Like that's important. Like addressing old wounds and childhood trauma, not staying and focusing on it, but at least addressing it because that plays a huge part leading up to transitioning and moving forward. Like for me, I couldn't move forward until I addressed what was happening in the past or identifying like why I was showing up because I was very angry to the point where I'm being transparent now. In my first marriage, I went to jail because of my anger.
Mm.
Because I was holding on so much in me. I never really share this story, but yeah, and I had shame and guilt from that. And so I carried that with me. Like even my mom telling me my soul was going to go to hell. I held on to that from 18 to the time I transitioned at 36, 18 years. And it wasn't until I went back to therapy and addressed all of that that I was able to move forward. So mental health is very important.
You got rid of all of those past traumas to the point
Yeah.
where you could let go of them and they didn't form limiting beliefs in your
Yeah.
future life.
Yes, yes. So when I meet someone, we are definitely going to tackle the limiting beliefs. That's ultimately what holds us back.
Exactly. I've had people start with me and actually go from terrified and scared,
Yeah,
full of doubts,
yeah,
and 6 weeks later, they're living full time.
full time. Yeah.
We got through those limiting beliefs and
Hmm.
off they went all by themselves. I didn't push.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not uncommon people for
yeah.
people to move forward once they do the mental work that you're
You're right.
talking about.
Yeah, you're right. And that's my focus is the mental work because I feel like ultimately that's where we can heal and move forward. And then, the limiting beliefs. And I do a lot of goal setting and accountability because that's also
Mhm.
important, like
Right.
knowing what direction you want to go in life and also knowing that you can. I realize I have a choice. For a long time, I thought I couldn't leave my job. I was connected to the paycheck. It was the most money I've ever made in my life. But my mental health was being greatly affected by the environment. And so I had to choose. Like, even in that, sometimes it's scary, but you have to make a choice. Either way, you're going to
Mhm.
make the choice or not, but either way, the choice is going to be made. So you might as well just get moving and just figure it out.
One of the things that perplexes me a lot within our community
Mhm.
is I see people sitting in the same support groups all around the country where I sit in,
Yeah.
and they never seem to make any progress. It's almost like the support group becomes a comfort zone for them to just sit and stay, as
Yeah.
opposed to taking steps forward.
Yeah. I've noticed that. But it goes back to, again, the limiting belief.
Hmm.
I can't believe it for you. And that's
Right.
what I tell my clients. As much as I want to believe it for you, I can't. You have to believe it for yourself.
Hmm.
And I would just encourage whoever's listening, don't get stuck in one spot. Like explore, be open because you never know who's out there waiting for you.
Well, and Sam, you talked about your anger issues.
Yeah.
Wendy's talked about drugs and alcohol. Different people have different way of suppressing what's going
Yeah.
on because you feel like you have to suppress it. But to be able then to clear all that, without
Yeah.
feeling guilty. Wendy talks about feeling guilty about marrying a woman, having
Yeah.
children, those types of things, but that doesn't serve at the point that people are at that you're at now.
No,
So
that's
being able to let go of that and even
yeah.
sharing that that's something that happened, something that you went through.
Yeah. I held on to it for a long time because I
Yeah.
was embarrassed and I was, telling myself, like, you shouldn't be acting this way. You shouldn't be responding this way. But I was never given the emotional tools to
Yeah.
express myself. So anger was the only way I knew how to
Yeah.
communicate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that's
Yeah.
a good message for people, understanding that you may be showing up in a way that's not really fitting into society,
Yeah.
but you don't have the tools. And
Right.
you and Wendy can serve people with your coaching and mentoring programs, give them the
Yes.
tools. I think
Yes.
that's wonderful. Thank you for doing that,
Thank you.
both of you.
Yeah.
I've found it very freeing talking about my guilt, my use of pot, and all of the other stuff that I did to repress this.
Yeah.
Talking about your anger too might feel freeing to you at some point as well.
Yeah. Talking about it, and I knew where it came from. So it wasn't just repressing everything and not being able to be my authentic self, but it was also shown in my household. So, like I said, my dad struggled with a drug addiction and alcohol. So when he and my mom were together, that's what I saw. I saw emotional, physical abuse, and arguing on his end. So I thought being in a relationship, that's what it looks like. That's how I get my needs met.
That
So
was your role model.
that was my role model. And
Yeah.
then, they separated when I was in junior high. And then, like I said, my mom was the sole provider, so she still wasn't the example. She wasn't very nurturing. There was no attachment there between us because her mom wasn't nurturing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it all
So
rolls downhill, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, that's what we see. That's how we think the world is.
right. And
Yeah.
so now I was able to recognize that and make a decision that I didn't want my life to go down that path.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
so happy for you.
congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
and Sam, earlier you mentioned about your employment. Is that something you want to talk about now? Did that relate to your transgender journey, or is that not something you want to talk about?
I can talk briefly. So it's still an ongoing process. So a part of my gender transition is what created all of this workplace
Mm.
turmoil and the reason why I had to walk away. It was a very toxic environment. I couldn't be myself and I was pretty much pushed out. That's also something I'm working through with my therapist. So again, I'm really intentional about my mental health because some days are harder than others because I still go back to what could I have done, to make it better.
Mm.
I had started doing a lot of, like I said, personal development before I even transitioned. And I was continuing with my personal development and therapy even at work. And so I thought it was something that I had to do to change me and how I showed up to work, but it had nothing to do with me. They just didn't want me there.
So, what advice would you give to employers about how to handle a situation like that?
I would say take the time to listen to the employee. I felt a lot of times they were dismissive and wasn't really listening. I would also encourage to take the training seriously. It's almost like just checking a box for most employers, but I would encourage taking the time to take those trainings, understanding it so that they can be more supportive of their employees that are LGBTQ. Not even LGBTQ, but just having an environment that has different cultures and backgrounds and beliefs.
Mhm.
That's important. Like, just be intentional about it. Don't just do it to check a box. I find a lot of corporations are like that. I would also recommend checking in with your staff. Emotional support is important too, especially in behavioral health. You
Mhm.
would think that working in behavioral health, you would know better. But what I found is they're just completely oblivious to it, or they don't want to recognize it.
Or do you think some of it is just not being willing to be uncomfortable? Sitting in a situation where they don't know what to do, they don't know
Yeah,
how to handle it, and so they
yeah,
handle it poorly. They don't have the skills or they don't have the intention to sit with that discomfort.
that plays a big part. I think that a lot of times it's just surface level, but if we are willing to get uncomfortable and have conversations with everyone in the room, we can definitely make some progress. And then also checking your biases, like we all have them,
Mhm.
and being able to talk about that in the workplace. It's almost like those conversations are off the table a lot of the times. We take the training, but we're not really having the discussions in the rooms.
Yeah, because people are afraid to say something.
Afraid to say something.
And
Yeah.
I hear that too a lot. not necessarily just with the transgender issue, but racial issues and other things too, that,
Yeah.
oh, I'm afraid to say anything. You know, people say, oh, I'm not PC enough. I don't know what I'm
Mhm.
supposed to say and what I'm not supposed to say. And so they get all hung up or really get defensive with that kind of thing. So I don't
Yeah.
know what to say, so I'm not going to say anything. Have you
Yeah.
seen that type of situation? Did you experience any of that?
Oh, a lot of times in my workplace.
Yeah.
A lot of times I was probably the one with the loudest voice, which is probably what caused, the attention.
Mm.
Because I did give a lot of pushback. I did ask questions. Even when I would go to appointments, there was times where I would get misgender in my chart where the gender marker was big and bold. Like, how can you get it wrong, and just following up with that with management, it was from having a conversation with management that we had an inclusion training. It's either you're quiet or you say something. And I'm not the type of person to be quiet, and me not being quiet is what brought me here.
Oh, I can relate to
Congratulations.
that.
And neither of you are keeping quiet, are you? Thank you for not keeping quiet.
Someone's got to do it. So,
Oh,
and I also want, patients coming along to feel supported and seen. So, I know it's bigger than me.
yeah. That's what Wendy and I are trying to do too, because we know it's bigger than the two of us
Yeah.
and involving people and getting this out there. I think if people can meet people who are born transgender and their families and that type of thing, different types of people, that
Yeah.
maybe we're planting some seeds,
Mhm.
and trying to get those seeds watered and just opening up minds just a crack, kind of
Yeah.
let some light in. And hopefully one day it will be wide open. But anyway, that's what I want to do. And I think Wendy too, is to open
Yeah.
up a few minds.
I think you two are doing an amazing job, and I see you two doing that already. Just going on your social medias, listening to your videos and the conversations, especially you as a cisgender woman, you don't see that oftentimes. When you talk
Right.
about allies, allies only show up when it's mostly convenient for them.
Mhm.
But I feel like from observation, it seems like you're in the trenches with Wendy, and so that's what we need more of.
And
Show
that's
up.
exactly why I absolutely love Lynn.
Yeah.
She has been the most open
Yeah.
and curious and wanting to learn.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful trait.
Yes.
Well, and I really feel like at my age, and Sam, I'm 75, so
Oh,
just a year younger than Wendy.
wow.
But, I feel like this is something that I have to do. People ask me, why? Why do you do this?
Yeah.
And when I'm thinking back the whole process, and I think I told Wendy this, I never wanted to be a writer. Never
Mm.
even knew what a podcast was, when I was growing up. But I always
Mm.
wanted to be a teacher.
Mm. Neither
And
do.
that's where I'm at, is that,
Yeah.
I taught grade school, I taught corporate trainings and things like that. And I did have a client who asked me to do diversity training for their faculty. And when I said, what do they want? He said, we want to check the box. It's like, okay, we can do that. And what else do you want to do? But, I just feel so committed. I hate to see what's going on. And especially all the time Wendy and I have spent together, talking to you, talking to some of these other people, it just breaks my heart to think of some of the things that may be happening politically if certain things come about for no reason. There is just no reason for it. What does your transition do to harm anybody else?
Does absolutely nothing.
If anything, it improves the world
It does.
because you become a much happier, fulfilled, wonderful person in the process and of much better mental health than a lot of people who are our critics.
Yeah. Yeah. I want our transition and our journey to empower someone else. Even if you're not trans, it gives you the permission to be yourself.
Mhm.
Mhm.
If we could
That
all be that and do that, I think the world would be a better place.
So be you and do you,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and
We'd
don't
be
ask
happier.
permission.
Yeah, we would be much happier as a society if we didn't just have to check boxes.
Yeah. Or just
Thank you.
wallow in the fear of something that's not real.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind.
Well, so many people
Yeah.
believe that the thoughts they have and the beliefs they hold our reality
Yeah.
when their beliefs are just the result of their thoughts.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. And the experiences come from that. So
Mhm.
what you believe you're going to experience. So I no longer believe I'm going to hell, so I no longer have that experience of fear. I think back to it, I'm like, wow.
Well,
Mhm.
my sister and I were talking about this yesterday, and
Mhm.
we grew up in a church, kind of a traditional church. And she
Yeah.
and I both remember, she's 2 years younger, both remember sitting in Sunday school where the Sunday school teacher said that unless you're baptized, blah, 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 you're going to go to hell. And both of us, without knowing this from each other, years later, we're comparing notes, and both of us questioned this and said, so you mean if the missionaries don't get to the middle of Africa or the middle of China, or, a baby's born and, something happens, that those people are going to go to hell? And it was like, yeah, you're damn right they are. you know, and as a child, I couldn't understand that. It just made no sense to me at all.
Yeah.
But that's the way people who are locked into that believe, and they can't get outside that box of thinking, what if?
Yeah. It's all control.
You've got it. It's all
So
control.
it's also a way to not acknowledge the power that we have as human beings,
Yeah.
because then we would be forced to be accountable for our choices. We can't blame God and we can't blame the devil.
What a concept.
We are humanizing being born transgender together.
Yes.
And thank
Yes.
you so much for that. Wendy, did you have any other questions before we wind this up today?
Sam, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for being here and talking with us so openly and so candidly. You're
Thank you for
wonderful.
that. I hope I did a good job.
You did.
Rambling.
Whatever we said, I always forget things, but whatever we talked about is what we were supposed to talk about. That's my belief. Let's give a plug for your business. Talk a little bit about your Be You Do You coaching program and how people can contact
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, so right now, the best way to contact me is through BUDoYouCoaching.com. I am offering one-on-one coaching. I also have some packages up. I'm also looking for guests to be on my Be You Do You podcast where you can come on and share your story and journey. Yes, Wendy, we have to connect. Yeah, so best way to reach me is BUDoYouCoaching.com. I also have a merchandise store, Be You Do You merchandise, t-shirts, coffee
Cool.
mugs, stickers, you name it, buttons. Also working on a journal, like writing a authenticity journal. So that's in the works.
And is it
Yes.
only for LGBTQ people, or?
We are open to the trans community and allies because this is definitely going to bridge the gap, having conversations with all of us. That's the only way we're going to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, we're kind of on the same page there, aren't we, Wendy?
Absolutely.
Having those uncomfortable conversations.
So, Sam, anything else you want to share before we sign off for this wonderful podcast?
No, I just appreciate being able to come on and share my experience and story. Hopefully, we can have a part two.
Okay, we'll put that on our agenda. We're going to do part two.
Definitely.
Right. And for our audience, thank you for joining us today. I know this has been fabulous with our wonderful guest, Sam Castle. So rate, review, share this out, subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and stay tuned for the next episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. I'm Lynn Murphy. This has been Wendy Cole and our wonderful guest, Sam Castle. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode of our fascinating interviews. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. So until next time, stay curious and stay kind.